Hello again, everybody. My name is John D. Healy. I do a podcast. It's called It's Good to Talk, and it sure is good to talk. And I always have interesting guests on. My guest today is from Mayo. I'll come to Breege Rowley in a minute. So I got into podcasting because I produced this book for my good friend Stoney McGurney, who was born in 1941. It's his life history with true stories up until recently. My sponsors are Liffey Van Lines. They're a moving company here in New York City. Without a doubt, the number one moving company in New York City, over 50 years experience. When it comes to moving, let Liffey do the lifting, and they are number one in the city. Now, I always give a shout out to Paddy McCarthy of the Irish Examiner USA. Paddy's paper is so popular, always good news, events, festivals, and stories. So I'm going to come to my guest right away. My guest today is Breege Rowley. She is from Mayo, my home county. I love Mayo. And Swinford is one of my favourite towns in Mayo. Welcome to It's Good to Talk. Let's talk about you and your story. You produced a film documentary called All Our Yesterdays. Well, we'll talk about all our yesterdays, and we'll hope we'll have more tomorrows. So, Breege, tell me about your background and why you got into this project of doing this documentary on all of our yesterdays.
Well, first of all, John, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on, and I'm delighted to be here to speak with you today. All Our Yesterdays started 10 years ago, but it actually started maybe 30 years ago. I used to be a I used to record home videos and stuff when I was in my wee years at Chiems's Roja back in the 1980s, late 80s and 90s. And basically, what was always hugely important was gathering people's stories. I love people. I love to hear their story and where they are and where they're coming from. And All Our Yesterdays started, as I said, in 2015. I met a friend who had told me they had thrown away all their cine film. And I was heartbroken because I felt, why did you do that? That's our social history. And they said they couldn't play it anymore. So I wanted to archive Swinford's memories, and that's how the project started. Going on from that, we got a little bit of funding, and to basically in the middle of that, COVID hit, and in the meantime, trying to get money to get it finished and all that, it was a long journey, but it's made, it's finished, and it's the story of Ireland told through the people of Swinford. So it's the story of the last kind of 250 years of Irish history, but it's not just a Swinford story, it's an Irish story. So that's the beginning, and that's where we are today.
Okay, well, I must commend you. You're very brave. It's a lot of work to produce a book or produce anything. It's, you have to do a lot of research, you have to do a lot of editing, you have to do a lot of proofreading, and it's no easy task. So congratulations and well done to you. I love Swinford, and it's one of my favourite towns. Chiems's Roja is a Gaelic word for meaning street festival. That's an annual event in Swinford, as you well know, and it celebrates the music and the arts. I give a shout out to Breege O'Connell there in Swinford. She's one of my favourite people. I worked with Breege O'Connell on a project bringing Handel's Messiah, the musical Castlebar, through the genius of Kevin Burke, who was the chairman of Rehab. So let's get back to your story, All of Our Yesterdays.
Well, basically where we are now at the moment, All Our Yesterdays, as I said, was the voices of the people of Swinford telling their story from the foundation, going back from the penal laws right into the famine over a period of 2 weeks in 1847. It was called Black October. 564 people died in Swinford over a 2-week period. And that's just a small semblance of what that did to our people. They're our people, and basically the story goes on from there, and the resilience of the people and the huge immigration that caused. To Michael Davitt, another Mayo man who set up the Land League, and his fight for the tenant farmers of Ireland. The story goes on then from there into the War of Independence and the Civil War, and the post-Civil War, and where Ireland was in the 90s, and the social history or the social story of growing up in Ireland and navigating our time as back to being an independent country. England ruled us for over 800 years, and in the 1930s, it was us, the Irish people, getting our hands back on our land. It's basically the story of community. The story, the biggest thing for Ireland is, the one thing that is very evident is our music, our culture, and our dance. And that's what has kept us connected with the world, around the world.
I totally agree. And our language, my first language is Gaelic, the Irish language. I speak English now, as people tell me. I speak better English than the Queen of England, but that's easy, she's dead. Now, a lot of words have come from a lot of what you gave me ideas there, like Michael Davitt, the Landleague in Mayo. He was a great Mayo man. There are many great Mayo people. And the word boycott, that word,
That's right.
everybody is familiar with that word now. It's in the English dictionary. And boycott means, to stop buying a product in a way of protesting, okay? The other word, I watched the trailer that you sent me, which is very, very, very interesting. And a
Thank you.
word an expression I never heard before. I heard it many, many times, but I didn't know where it came from. And that is like daylight robbery.
Right. Yeah.
Daylight robbery, again, came from the penal times for the British, where they would tax the daylight. So, in other words, the chimney on your house was one thing. If you had two chimneys, you were taxed. If you had one, you didn't. The door and the windows of your cottage, the English they didn't want too much daylight coming in, so to force us to be depressed. So the half door came in. So if you had a half door, which I think is kind of unique and interesting, because close the bottom half and that keeps out XYZ, and the top half is open and lets in the fresh air. And one of your characters in your documentary said that's where the expression came, daylight robbery. So the English course, they shut down our schools at the time. I was fortunate enough to arrive. I was born after all the schools were shut down, all the schools. So we'd have no education. And at that time, I'm jumping across to here now anyway, head schools, where the teachers couldn't teach us in schools, or they would be arrested or taken away by the British Empire. And head schools were important. And then we moved from head schools into proper national schools. Okay. So let me call Jimmy for a minute. He always sings a song on my podcast. He's just going to sing a song for you, for me, and for the listeners.
On the first day of January 1892, they opened Ellis Island and they let the people through. And the first to cross the threshold of that Isle of Hope and Tears was Annie Moore from Ireland, who was all of 15 years. Isle of Hope, Isle of Tears, Isle of Freedom, Isle of Fears. But it's not the Isle you left behind. It's that Isle of hunger, Isle of pain, Isle you'll never see again. But the Isle of home is always on your mind. In the little bag she carried all her past and history, and her dreams for the future in the land of liberty. And courage is the passport when your old world disappears. But there's still future in the past when you're all of 15 years. Isle of hope, Isle of tears, Isle of freedom, Isle of fears. But it's not the Isle you left behind. It's that Isle of hunger, Isle of pain, Isle you'll never see again. But the Isle of home is always on your mind. They closed down Ellis Island in 1943. 17 million people had come there for sanctuary. And in springtime when it came here, and I stepped onto its piers, I thought of how it must have been when you're all of 15 years. 'Cause Isle of hope, Isle of tears, Isle of freedom, Isle of fears. But it's not the Isle you left behind. It's that Isle of hunger, Isle of pain, Isle you'll never see again. But it's not the Isle you left behind. It's that Isle of hunger, Isle of pain, Isle you'll never see again.
Now, Breege, back to you. Tell me more about some of the characters in the
Well,
documentary.
you were on about daylight robbery. One of the very strong characters in my piece is a guy called Tom Hennigan. And he has Hennigan's heritage in Killasser and County Mayo. And again, no more than what I have done, he has done over the last 30 years, in the sense that he has a museum of what Ireland was like in the 1950s. He has created a museum within his farm. And like that, he has all the information on what it was like farming at that time, but
Right.
also in relation to the history of the penal laws and the
Well,
daylight robbery.
I'm very interested in that project. So he's in a place called Killasser. I know you're Swinford. You're
Yeah.
only about 10 miles from Knock. So your friend is from Killasser. Where is that in relation to Killala or Ballina?
Well, in relation to Swinford, it's only down the road. It's only about 3
Okay.
kilometres down the road.
Okay.
Basically, it's famously the turnoff from the River Mayo, one of the
Yeah.
best European fishing rivers
Oh, sweet.
in Europe. It's salmon fishing. So Tom is there. So he's only about 3 kilometres from
Okay.
in the countryside from
Okay.
Swinford. But again,
Okay.
he's been telling the Irish story for the last 30 years in his museum, and
Well,
he has gathered a huge amount
I
of
would love to get pictures and videos of his stuff. And
yeah.
next time I'm back in Swinford, I will definitely visit his
Mm.
museum, which is a farm, very creative. You mentioned the River Moy in Ballina. It's a big fishing river. People like Jack Charlton fish there, and other people fish there. And indeed, one of your people from Ballina, the Undertaker there, the McGowns,
That's
is
right.
a great historian as well, and I admire him a lot for having met him in person, but he put Inniscrone on the map
Yeah.
by bringing a second-hand used aeroplane from Shannon. He had to buy it, I guess, and bring it and put it on a site in Inniscrone and turn it into a tourist attraction like an Airbnb. I think that is creativity, and I love creativity. So you mentioned one of your characters. Let's talk about a few more of them, where you found them, and I know you had to do a bit of running around, I'm sure.
Actually, do you know something? The biggest thing about this film is that all my characters are from the town, from
Oh, good.
the information. So the historians, we've Bernard O'Hara, who is a great Michael David orator on his story. He has wrote a number of books on Michael David. So Bernard O'Hara was a great source of information and a great interviewee for the famine and the land leak. So he gave us all that information. On top of that, then we have another great orator, which would be Michael Comer. Now, unfortunately, God rest his soul, he has passed since I interviewed him. And again, this is why this story is hugely important. And this is why I did this film, in the sense that, every time somebody dies, it's another archive gone. And these are
Yes.
living people telling our story. And again, they had gathered so much information. A lot of the work that I had done was I piggybacked their work, so,
Yes.
they had the experience and the research done
And the
on the
knowledge, yeah.
history of Swinford. Bernard O'Hara had the history and the story done of Michael David, and also Michael Comer then into the War of Independence and the Civil War. These were all local people that were telling the Irish story. And again, in relation to the music, without music, it's all the layers that makes a film. And
Yes.
it was Swinford Cultus that
Yeah.
provided the incidental music. But again,
Mm.
I worked with a fantastic composer called Conor Walsh. And again, unfortunately, he has passed. And he was a young fella, 36, but he is an unbelievable. I was working with him on other projects, and his music just slotted so well.
Actually, when you mentioned that Breege, when I looked at the trailer, I was impressed with the filmmaking itself. I was impressed with the music itself. And you mentioned there Bernard O'Hara. Think if it's the same Bernard O'Hara, he taught me in college in Galway. He was the head of the business studies department. Am I right or wrong?
It's the
Same
very
man?
same man.
Oh wow!
So
So
there you go.
you
He
taught
is,
me well,
and
I wasn't an easy subject. So
yeah,
I'm glad Bernard O'Hara is doing well. You can give him my regards.
I will.
Well, Michael D. Higgins taught me too. Michael D. was more into the poetry and social studies. But Bernard O'Hara had the overall management role of being the head of the business studies department. So I'm
Yeah.
glad he's alive and doing well because, time goes on. As you said, all of our lost history or lost lives or all that, hopefully the future. But I'm glad you mentioned Bernard O'Hara. And as a
But
matter of fact,
again,
when I was in Galway, I think he had a brother who was in the engineering department, if I'm right. But we can fact check later. So tell us more about some of the more characters that you
well,
found.
so again, another great, she's working in the history department in UI, and her name was Mary Boran. And again, Callow woman, which is again just down the road, and again orator, brilliant orator and historian on the education system in Ireland. The charity, the
Very good.
Sisters of Charity, and their the important role that they played for education in Swinford, but also around Ireland. After
Yeah,
the famine happened, there was no education from the penal laws.
that was the
No
saddest thing of
Was
all.
Catholic was allowed to be educated. They weren't allowed to own their own lands. So all these things was keeping the people really poor and
Yeah.
their voices not being heard. So
Well,
again, the Sisters of
it was
Mercy
really
came in.
and truly, it was like genocide, back then when we didn't know what genocide was. Starve us of our education, starve us of our food, and hope that we wither away. My guest today is Breege Rowley from Swinford in County Mayo. She's on my podcast, It's Good to Talk. And if you like our topic, please do subscribe. Now, back to that history again. I know it's 50 years this month since De Valera died, okay? And I'll put my cards fair and square on the table. I was never a fan of Eamon de Valera. I blame him for the Civil War. I blame him for the sniper that shot Michael Collins, who was a great man, and did the best deal he could do dealing with the British. Tell me more about your project and tell me more about the characters. I know I'm glad you mentioned Bernard O'Hara and his brother from also taught in Galway in the engineering department. Who else have you? They seem to be a lot of Swinford, but tell me more.
To be honest with you, John, they're all Swinford, but they are experts in every area that they speak about. Like even in relation to the Civil War and Michael Collins and Dev, Mary Boran again from NUI has a great back experience or back catalogue of experience to speak on this matter. And again, she had great insights into the reasons and also the information on what happened in Swinford around the time of the War of Independence and the Civil War and how it affected the people. And again, in Swinford, just about 2 weeks before Michael Collins was shot, there was a big ambush in Swinford. And that story is told within the film. But the survival of the people, we're talking about, 800 years of England ruling Ireland. This is, we're a very young country in some
Yeah,
ways. Our resilience and our fight goes back for generations.
I was going to say that, Bridge, the resilience of the Swinford people and the Mayo people, indeed, was a battle in Glenamoy where I was born. And I had Philip Irvin on here. He's a native of Glenamoy. Brian Layden is a historian that was on here. And we went into detail about like brothers fighting against brothers and cousins fighting against cousins. That civil war was an absolute, no war is nice. All wars are sad. Captain Healy died on that ambush. I don't think it's any relation to mine if he is to be true alcohol. But innocent people dying, fighting for what? The British loved when we fought among ourselves because they viewed it at the point that we're killing each other. So it saved them having to starve us or kill us. During the famine, as you mentioned, there was enough food in one way. I know the potato crop failed due to the blight. The stalks died, the potatoes died. But yet England were stealing our food. I've used the word stealing. We still had to export to them while everyone went hungry.
Yeah.
Similar to what's going on now with Israel and Palestine, like land grabbers, really and truly. And I hope and pray in 2030 for United Ireland by peaceful means, okay? And I wish Mary Lou MacDonald, head of Sinn Féin, the best in that. And Sinn Féin has indeed looked at the economic situation. When we take back, when Ireland gets 6 counties back, it has to be fair and square. And Mary Lou is intelligent enough to look at the cost of taking it back. Winston Churchill referred to Northern Ireland as Ireland's back garden, okay? In other words, it was a pain in the ass to him. He really didn't want, he was willing to give it back, but De Valera fucked that one up, okay? Anyway, it's back to your historian friends again, Breege. Thanks for being a guest.
So basically, after the War of Independence and the Civil War, the film goes on to tell the human story of survival and resilience and community. And again, how we settled into taking back our country. All right. And there was no money in this country. So there was a huge amount of immigration again and migration. And a lot of families, the husbands were gone for 10 months of the year. They'd either go to England or they'd be away in America or wherever, and they'd be sending the money home. That story is very, very evident within this piece. And it's basically, we have archive letters from one of our interviewees, and it's Joe Mellett. Joe Mellett is a publican in Swinford since the 1700s. He came in with Brabson when Brabson was our the landlord within Swinford, and his ancestors came in with Brabson at that stage. Joe Mellett and his family has been business people in the town for over 200 years, 250 years. And basically, he has letters wrote from New York where his family had given the passage money to a person and they hadn't yet repaid it. And it's that letter. This story of people's resilience, but also it's not just in Ireland, it's the people that went away. Basically, that's how the Irish survived in Ireland, was the money that was sent back from England, from America, from wherever people were, so they could pay the rents, that they could pay the rates on the houses and so forth. But there was very little employment in Ireland at that point. And again, the nuns in Swinford at that stage opened up a laundry. Not the laundry that a lot of people will think of. This was a commercial laundry. And that was an enterprise. People got paid to work within that laundry. And they literally was the only laundry that supplied all of Mayo for a very long time. And that opened in 1925 and ran until 1975. And that was an income for people, women in Ireland, are in Swinford, to feed their families. But a lot of the money that came into Swinford came from abroad. Two women who were basically running the farms with their kids while their husbands went off and worked abroad.
Well, you bring up a very good point there. I mean, when Oliver Cromwell, a British thug, invaded us and came into the Dublin side, the richer side of Ireland, and he told, like, my ancestors and your ancestors as well, he said, to hell or to Connacht, which meant we'll kill you or just disappear. So the people that moved to the west, like Mayo, as you say, and indeed Galway, Connemara and part of Donegal, we as a people, as a community, had to become self-sufficient. The land was poor, the farms were small, but yet we had to exist and survive, and self-sufficiency was the name of the game. You mentioned a landlord there in Swinford. We had a landlord in down where I was from, Dinnamoy. Lord, they were all lords. What a fucking big name for an asshole. But Binghamstown, and there's a town named after him. I grew up as a young boy. I wasn't allowed to fish in the river right under my land. I wasn't allowed to go out shooting, pheasants. Yet the British tourists would come and fish in the river under my land, or my parents' land. And my grandmother, truth be told, story about her, she challenged one of these guys. He was walked down through the land with his fishing rod and started fishing in the river. So she knew her history and her league, and she told him that he was trespassing on her land. And he more or less gave her the finger, And she was an old woman. She had a walking stick. And she got her walking stick and she pushed it into his back and pushed him right into the fucking river. Good for my grandmother. Anyway, back to more history of your film documentary. And we'll talk more about where we can see it. And it'll be a big, big, big hit when it arrives here in New York. So, Breege, back to you.
Again, look at John. This story isn't just an Irish story. This is, it's a story for the diaspora. Like anyone that has any Irish blood in them, they need to see this film because they need to know where they've came from. And this film, over the now hour long that runs tells them where they have came from, where the people have originated from. You're on about the poorest, from Hell or to Connacht. You could draw a line from the top of Donegal all the way down to Cork
Kerry. Yeah,
and
Cork.
Kerry. And you have the poorest land. In Mayo, we have a lovely vista of the Atlantic Ocean. But you can't eat beauty. That's what they say. You can't eat beauty.
Yeah.
And that's where, my uncle is one of the interviewees on it. And, one of the things that he said, we were bred for export. And that's why I think this is a really important diaspora film, because we have gone, they say there's 70 million Irish diaspora worldwide, and there's communities all over this planet and that's who we are. We are the Irish that have traveled.
Yes.
And, there's so many famous entrepreneurs all over the world that are from,
Indeed.
the west of Ireland or just Ireland full stop, And that's where this story is all resonating from.
Yeah.
Where did we get our resilience? Where did we get our fight? Where did we get our drive to keep going? It's
But
coming from
Breege,
our past.
I can answer. I can answer that hopefully to a degree. I guess sometimes out of adversity comes greatness. Now, I had Jerry Coyle on here, Councillor Jerry Coyle from Mayo, Gisala. He wrote a book about his father fighting again for Ireland. And people would say, Jerry is from Gisala in Mayo near Belmullet. And it was beautiful, beautiful scenery. But his father used to tell him, just like you said there, you can't eat scenery. Scenery doesn't put food on the table. So Jerry Coyle expresses that extremely well. Jerry Coyle's son is living here in Chicago. He has a world title for boxing. Good contact for you to know when you come to Chicago with your documentary. I'll be giving you contacts here in New York. The IBO is the Irish Business Organization of New York.
Okay.
Lots of good people there, and we're like, we have the Mayo spirit. I'm sure you've heard the word mehel means teamwork in Gaelic. So we all help each other. So I'm delighted to be able to help you. The Irish Rep Theatre is here in New York too, and the top guy there is Kieran O'Reilly. It's been going a long, long time. Good for plays, theatre, and your documentary film as well. So I'll be putting you in contact with all of the contacts in New York. And you should be very, very proud of yourself to have, number one, produced this. And it is important to preserve our history. And every history is sad. As I often say, love and war, easy to start, hard to end. So, Breege, I'm going to leave the last word with you before we sign off. And I usually sign off in my Irish language. So, Breege, you have the last word.
Oh my God, my last word. If there was one message I'd like to get through to your listeners and basically say what all our yesterdays, all our yesterdays saves Irish voices before they disappear. And in doing so, it tells not just Mayo's story, but the universal Irish story of resilience, immigration, music, pride, and survival. It's a film for our diaspora, because it reconnects them with where they've came from, and it shows why remembering matters for the future. And that's basically what I want. You're on about mehel. That's what this, killing the pig, that's part of this story, in the bog. It's our story. It's the simple story told by the voices of the people of Swinford.
It is, and as I said before, it's great that you documented it and put it into film and all that. Notably so, people do unite when they're up against a negative situation, as is happening here now in the USA. My guest, Breege Rowley, my guest today on It's Good to Talk, and they subscribe if you like the podcast. So I want to wish you well, Breege, with your project, and I want to meet you and greet you when you get to New York. You were sent to me through the Mayo Society of New York, and he highly recommended you to be featured on this podcast. So
I'm delighted, and I can't wait to meet you in person.
Thank you very much. And when you get to New York, the Mayo Society of New York will have the red carpet rolled out for you. You'll meet the IBO, Irish Business Organization, and we'll help you along the way, as we do, because we are from Mayo, and we help each other. So you will have your film here in New York, and you'll also get to Chicago, and hopefully get to Boston, and then it'll get its own resilience, so to say. So on that note, Breege, I'm going to go out in my Irish language which means shin scale, that's the story. Agus be scale ella, that means we've done a story. And another word there, the scale shin gahan white, that means that story was very good.